Okay, good evening, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order. It is 6:01. If you could we could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards.
Present.
Councilmember Hagley.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Vice Mayor Harrod.
Here.
Mayor Mitchell.
Here, thank you. And could you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. So we did have a closed session and there's no reportable action. Announcements and presentations. So we have a proclamation recognizing May 2025 as Affordable Housing Month. Councilmember Hagley?
Before that, I'd like to move that we approve the agenda.
Oh, thank you. How did I miss that?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards.
Aye.
Councilmember Hagley.
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod.
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes. Now we'll go on. Thank you.
All right. This is a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg recognizing the month of May 2025 as Affordable Housing Month in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas the month of May is recognized as National Affordable Housing Month. Affordable housing is essential for creating stable, healthy, and vibrant communities and plays a crucial role in addressing poverty and inequality. And every individual deserves a safe, decent, and affordable place to call home, regardless of their income or background. And the strength of Healdsburg community and the strength of the Healdsburg community and economy depends on providing access to housing options that allow current and future residents of all income levels and ethnicities to live where they work. And the City of Healdsburg housing element calls for an increase in deed-restricted affordable housing, the optimization of affordable housing production, and the expansion of affordable housing incentives. And the City of Healdsburg is committed to providing access to affordable housing for all its residents and has adopted policies and programs to increase the production of affordable housing and expand access to affordable homeownership opportunities. And the Affordable Housing Month provides an opportunity to recognize the critical importance of affordable housing, raise awareness about the need for affordable homes, and highlight the work of organizations and individuals dedicated to increasing access to affordable housing for all members of our community. And the city encourages the public to join in the recognition of the importance of affordable housing in our community during Affordable Housing Month. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby recognizes the month of May 2025 as Affordable Housing Month in the City of Healdsburg. So ordered, Mayor Mitchell.
Thank you. And so we have Sonia Bick-Barwick who wants to receive the proclamation. Do you want to say something?
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor Mitchell.
Oh, sorry. Oh, somebody's doing it for me, I think. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Mitchell, council members, and city staff. On behalf of Generation Housing, thank you for recognizing May as Affordable Housing Month and for your continued leadership in addressing our region's housing challenges. Healdsburg has shown the understanding that affordable housing isn't just about buildings, it's about people. You recognize that stable housing is the foundation of a healthy, equitable, and resilient community. Access to affordable homes impacts everything: our economy, our climate, education, health, and whether working families can continue to live and thrive here. At Generation Housing, we're proud to be your partner, working alongside the city to advance bold, lasting housing solutions. Affordable Housing Month is a great reminder that local leadership matters. It's an opportunity to reimagine outdated policies, champion community-driven projects, and build partnerships that make it possible for more working families to call Healdsburg home. Thank you again for your leadership and for recognizing that housing is not just a need, but a shared responsibility, one that defines the strength and the future of Healdsburg.
Thank you. Can you stick around for a photo after we do the next proclamation?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we have a proclamation recognizing May 2025 as Jewish American Heritage Month. And Councilmember Kelly would like to read this, please.
Thank you. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg declaring the month of May 2025 as Jewish American Heritage Month in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas Jewish Americans have been an important part of the American story and have greatly contributed to all areas of American life and culture since our nation's earliest days. And on April 20th, 2006, the federal government proclaimed May as Jewish American Heritage Month, stating, "As a nation of immigrants, the United States is better and stronger because Jewish people from all over the world have chosen to become American citizens." And since then, proclamations in support of Jewish American Heritage Month have been made by presidents of the United States annually. And generations of Jews have fled to the United States in search of a better life for themselves and their families, and these immigrants made invaluable contributions in support of equality and civil rights through their leadership and achievements. And Jewish Americans are racially, ethnically, socially, politically, and economically diverse, with approximately 12 to 15% of Jews in the United States being individuals of color. And in recent years, Jewish Americans have increasingly experienced anti-Semitism, including but not limited to physical attacks, vandalism, verbal and physical harassment, and hateful comments posted on social media. Healdsburg shares an obligation to condemn and combat anti-Semitism wherever it exists, and to include Jewish Americans in all facets of civic life, and to stand with the Jewish American community against hatred or bigotry in our city and country. And there is a need for education and policies that are culturally competent when describing, discussing, or addressing the impacts of being Jewish in all aspects of American society, including discourse and policy. We celebrate the rich and diverse heritage of Jewish American community, including those who live, work, and play in Healdsburg. So now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg declares the month of May 2025 as Jewish American Heritage Month in the City of Healdsburg. So ordered, Mayor Mitchell.
Thank you. And we have Irene, is it Hodis, and Julie Rothberg to receive the proclamation. If you'd like to say something, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us, Mayor Mitchell, council members, city staff. Just a personal note for me, as a resident of Healdsburg, I moved from a small Jewish town called New York City and came here and really just have been so amazed at how our small town embraces our Jewish community. I'm one of the founders of Jewish Healdsburg, which really has been a grassroots group among residents here to bring more Jewish culture, religion, events to our town. And it is so heartwarming to see how our town has embraced that. And I've seen all of you guys at our first event, our first official community event in December. We had our Hanukkah lighting and party, which we thought a handful of people would come to, and over 250 people attended. Not inside in the, we had our fire department there. It was amazing just to see the outpouring of support. And since then, we have started a Hebrew school. We are hosting monthly Shabbats. We hosted a community Seder. We did a tree planting for Tu B'Shvat. And we continue to have all of our community events are open to everyone. And we're just really thrilled that you guys are so supportive and really have embraced everything that we are trying to do and have started really in the last 6 months. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for supporting all diversity here in Healdsburg. We feel very welcome and are proud to be residents here and to be part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to come up and get your proclamation and we'll get a picture with you?
Can we bring up some of our community members as well?
Yes, everyone you'd like. Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. That was fun. Always love the proclamations and getting to see so many wonderful people be here for those. Now we move on to city manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a handful of updates tonight. I wanted to first acknowledge two events over the last week and provide a little bit of an update on one. Several of you were in attendance. We had a community meeting to discuss the March Avenue paving improvements last week. Really well attended, I don't think, for a paving project. I don't think I've seen a meeting in my career with quite that many. So I think I counted over 50 attendees to come and provide input on design. We met at the Fitch Mountain Campus Elementary School. So gratitude to the school district, which hosted, so we were able to have the meeting reasonably close, walking distance, certainly from the area of the improvements. So it was a really good turnout. There was really good feedback, helping us with some of the prioritization that we'll need to make in terms of the design, and also putting some things on our radar that I think probably just weren't there in terms of very micro local considerations that people are thinking about and how they use that street. So great turnout and great participation. We will be fine tuning that design and have one more check-in as our intent with the council, with the larger goal of getting that project out to bid this year, as we've indicated before, and keep it moving. I think, while we did get a lot of different feedback and we took it all in, one takeaway that was prevalent but not surprising is people are anxious to see that project happen. So we take that to heart, and we'll try to keep it moving. So you'll hear a little bit more about that in the weeks to come, but we'll try to keep the pedal to the floor on that and keep that project moving along on schedule. And then yesterday we all celebrated, and I know council members will probably speak to this during your reports later this evening, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we celebrated the naming of the community center for Abel de Luna yesterday. Really great event all around. I don't think this is surprising, but to see how palpable that impact was on former Mayor de Luna and all of his family and loved ones was actually really powerful. And it was a great celebration. So appreciate everybody's participation in that. And I wanted to especially call out our community services department. The vision for that started as a fairly humble, special, and heartfelt, but humble event. And it, as events tend to do, it just got a little bit more involved as the weeks led up to it, and required at the end a really Herculean effort by our team to pull it together and turn the front parking lot of that community center into a great event space. And as expected, it came off really well and was well handled. So I wanted to just thank the community services team for leaning in and spending many, many hours working on that to make it successful. Just quickly, a handful of things coming up in the next couple of weeks. We are very much in the spring event season at this point. Obviously, the Future Farmers Fair starts this week. Loading in will begin on Wednesday, and there will be some activities starting Thursday. So I understand the activity is actually starting a little bit at the fairgrounds a little bit earlier than it has in past years. The Twilight Parade will be Thursday evening. Of course, we are not officially the producer of that parade, but we are, as the city, definitely participants. So I know you'll all be there, and we'll have many departments represented. So we're working with them on that to make sure we have a public safety plan in place and good representation for the city. The fair will be going on this weekend, and then Tuesday will be our first Tuesday concert of the year. The band is Los Cadetes de Memo Cavada, which is Norteño music. So I know we'll have the weather looks, I think, pretty good, as far as we know. So I'm sure we'll have a great turnout and celebrate the start of that season. And then next Thursday at Rec Park at 11 a.m., we'll have a ceremony commemorating the completion of our recycled water pipeline project. That facility is connected and has recycled water, so we'll come up with some good ways to celebrate its presence on site and just take a little bit of time to mark what I know has been a long journey and a project we have talked about a lot, and make sure we just acknowledge the important completion of that. And then lastly, 2 weeks from tonight, on June 2nd, we will have our annual Pride Flag raising ceremony in advance of the city council meeting. So that will be 5 p.m. on Monday the 2nd. So we look forward to gathering with the council and with community members. We've already started putting out some outreach about that, but that will obviously commemorate the start of Pride Month. We will also, consistent with our city policy, be lighting the bridge to celebrate Pride Month, beginning either that day or the day before and illuminated for the whole month. So lots coming up. I could go on in terms of events, but that should keep us covered for the next 2 weeks, and we'll have more to share at that point.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for the city manager? Nope. Okay. So
Mayor
we'll move
Mitchell, I
on.
just have one quick question.
Oh,
Can you-
sorry.
City
Go ahead.
Manager Kay, can you repeat the date of the ribbon cutting for the recycled water project?
Absolutely. That is Thursday, May 29th, 11 a.m. at Rec Park.
And we're going to squirt each other with water or something fun like that.
The brainstorming has come up with some interesting things in the staff meetings, but we'll make sure it is safe.
Water
Whatever
balloons?
we come up with will be safe and appropriate.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we'll move on to public comment on items on the consent calendar and non-agenda items. So this time is set aside to receive comments from the public regarding matters of general interest not on the agenda, but related to City Council business. Pursuant to the Brown Act, however, City Council cannot consider any issues or take action on any requests during this comment period. Do we have anybody in the public comment who would like to make public comment? Welcome.
Hi, my name is Steve Moskovitz, too close, a resident of Parkland Farms. And I sent an email, forwarded an email to council members regarding the Laura Fish Summersall design review. And I just wanted to appear in person and just kind of reiterate what I forwarded in my email. I'm part of a pickleball committee that's been working with Parks and Recs, and they're doing a fine job trying to work with us to try to find some additional sports courts. Last week at the Parks and Recs meeting was the first time where we got a look at the budget for the design review of the park. I would take a step back too and kind of state that part of the reason I moved to Parkland Farms is because of this plan, because of the concept plan, looking at all the great amenities that I could walk to from where I live. And so when we looked at the concept plan last week and saw that, based on funding, that a lot of things are going to have to be delayed or eliminated from the plan, it kind of made me take a little further look and make some observations as to what's in the plan. And the thing that stuck out to me is I know they're planning on lighting the walking trail. And I saw the budget last week of 1.8 million for electric. And so it kind of begs the question whether or not City Council has reviewed kind of the prioritization of funds that we're putting into the project and whether or not we could spend that money to do some of the other elements that are being eliminated. I personally wouldn't think a lot of people are going to walk on the trail after dark. That's my opinion. But I do think you're going to get a much bigger bang for the buck if you're able to move forth with sports courts and some other elements that apparently we are being told that they don't have enough funding. So I would really urge council before it's simply approving the phase one plan to really consider whether or not those funds could be allocated differently than for electric and lighting and maybe kind of compromise and do a lot more of the original concept plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so we'll close public comment at this point and look for approval of the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes, thank you. So that moves us on to public hearings. We do not have any tonight. And then we go to old business, the fiscal year 2024-25 third quarter budget review as of March 31, 2025. Finance Director Katie Edgar.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Katie Edgar, Finance Director here to present to you the third quarter financial update for fiscal year 24-25. Next slide, please. The proposed action tonight is to receive a presentation on the third quarter fiscal update and adopt a resolution approving amendments to the fiscal year 24-25 budget. A full list of the proposed amendments are included in the agenda packet. To summarize tonight's report, overall, revenues and expenditures are trending largely in line with the amended budget, resulting in year-end estimates to close that reflect positively in most funds. Notably, increased consumption of both water and electricity through the third quarter are driving respective utility rate revenues to exceed the current adopted budget. Next slide, please. Starting with general fund revenues, through the third quarter of the year ending March 31st, 2025, the city received $13.3 million or 68% of the adopted $19.5 million budget. The first and second disbursements of property tax have been received, with revenues totaling $2.8 million or 87% of the adopted budget. The final property tax disbursement will be received in June and is expected to close the year slightly exceeding budget projections. Property transfer tax received through March totals $157,000, 78% of the adopted budget. The total number of property transfers in quarter three continues to outpace third quarter of the prior year by approximately 29%, and staff estimate revenues to end the year just under the $200,000 budget. Vehicle license fee swap revenue is dispersed in 2 equal tranches, and the budget was amended at the mid-year review, so staff expect revenues to end the year exactly on budget. Sales tax revenue received through March totaled $3.6 million or 64% of the adopted budget. Notably, this excludes the March disbursement of sales tax revenue that will be received later this month. Revenues are currently trending to the end of the year in line with the amended budget, reflecting about a 3.4% reduction from the prior year's sales tax revenue. Business license tax received through the third quarter total $177,000, 67% of the adopted budget. The renewal period for fiscal year 25-26 business license just opened in May, and staff anticipate about half of the businesses to renew their license before the end of the fiscal year, with the remaining businesses having until July 31st to renew before penalties are in effect. The city has received approximately $600,000 in franchise fee revenues, 67% of the adopted budget. Revenues did not include the third quarterly disbursement from Comcast, but they did include the annual payments from PG&E. Franchise fees received from PG&E reflected a 10% reduction from the prior year. And despite increases in garbage rates, revenue through the third quarter from Recology reflects only a 1% year-over-year increase, possibly indicating a reduction of services in the city. Overall, based on current trends, a franchise fee revenue is expected to end the year about 8% under budget. Transient occupancy tax received in the general fund totaled $976,000, 71% of the adopted budget. Development fees and permits have collectively received 85% of the budgeted revenue of $1.2 million. Current projections anticipate revenues to exceed the budget by almost 18%, driven primarily by building permit revenue expected from large developments in the next 2 months. Intergovernmental revenue received through the third quarter of the year represents only 23% of the amended budget due to the Coastal Conservancy grant being billed on a reimbursement basis. Significant fire fuels reduction work was completed in the third quarter, with the final reimbursement request submitted at the end of April that almost entirely expended the grant amount. Unrestricted interest revenue received through March was 62% of the adopted budget. However, this does not include the third quarter disbursement from LAIF, and when adjusted, interest revenues are largely in line with the budgeted trends. Restricted interest represents the interest earned on the investments held in the pension trust fund that are restricted for paying pension costs. The general fund received about $675,000 through the third quarter of the year and is projected to end the year in alignment with the amended budget. The city received $935,000 in charges for miscellaneous discretionary services, 105% of the total $890,000 budget. All the expected revenues for the year have been received through the third quarter, and the additional unanticipated revenue is related to the Enzo Village Payment in lieu of taxes agreement. This pilot agreement consists of 2 fees, one triggered by a certificate of occupancy and the other at the issuance of a welfare exemption from paying property taxes. This year, Enzo Village successfully received their welfare exemption, resulting in the city receiving approximately $90,000 in unanticipated in lieu fees in place of the city's share of the property taxes that Enzo Village is now exempt from paying. Next slide, please. General fund expenses through March totaled approximately $15 million, or 75% of the adopted $20.1 million budget. Overall, general fund expenses by department are trending largely in line with expectations. However, legal services costs continue to exceed our projections, with costs for the third quarter totaling 106% of the departmental budget. The Public Works Department is also trending high and expected to end the year slightly over budget. Overall, savings in the finance, city manager, and police department budgets associated with staff vacancies throughout the year are expected to balance out the unanticipated expenses, resulting in the total general fund expenses expected to end the year just under budget. Next slide, please. Putting it all together, the fund balance chart presented here shows the current adopted budget for fiscal year 24-25 in the first column and the estimates to close in the second column. The estimates to close were prepared in collaboration with the respective departments and the finance team, and general fund revenues are anticipated to end the year about $309,000 under the adopted budget, while total expenditures, including operating and one-time, are projected to end the year about $82,000 under the adopted budget. Overall, the impact on the projected unallocated fund balance is that it is reduced down to approximately $233,000. In August of 2022, the Council first approved the General Fund Surplus Policy, which promotes long-term strategic thinking by allocating one-time revenues towards one-time expenses to maintain a structurally balanced budget. The policy was further reviewed in conjunction with the preparation of the current biennial budget, and as currently adopted, defines a surplus as an unallocated fund balance exceeding $250,000. In accordance with this policy, staff have determined, based on the projected unallocated fund balance of $233,000, that there is no surplus available to allocate this fiscal year. Next slide, please. Moving on to community services, TOT revenue earned in the third quarter of the year totaled $4.9 million, or 71% of the adopted $6.9 million budget. Revenues are right in line with seasonal projections in the hospitality industry that reflect approximately 71% to be typically earned through the third quarter. The third quarter revenues, especially February and March, were notably lower than average. However, this offset the high September returns that had contributed to the higher than average mid-year revenues. With summer right around the corner, causing seasonal trends to tick up in the fourth quarter, staff will be watching closely, but ultimately are projecting revenues to come in line with budget. Overall, revenue received in the Community Services Fund totals $5.7 million, 71% of the adopted $8.1 million budget. Next slide, please. Community services expenses by program totaled $6.2 million at March 31st, 67% of the adopted $9.3 million budget. Several programs are trending high through the third quarter, including the Community Center, Senior Center, Swim Center, and the Contracted Facility Operations, which represents largely the Villa Chanticleer. Estimates to close reflect that these divisions and a few others are expected to exceed their adopted budget for the year. Driving factors of these overages include increased utility costs at city facilities due to additional irrigation and energy usage, as well as additional deferred maintenance work at the Villa Chanticleer and staffing shortages at the Swim Center. When adjusting to remove the non-departmental category, which accounts for overhead costs and capital project expenditures, operational expenses by program total 76% through March. Next slide, please. There are two proposed amendments tonight to the Community Services Fund, which are reflected in the first column of the fund balance chart presented here as the revised budget. The city was recently awarded a $25,000 grant from the Community Foundation of Sonoma County to support an end-of-life resource center program at the Senior Center. Staff are proposing to amend the revenue and the expense budget in the Senior Center to account for this grant. Estimates to close reflect that overall revenues are expected to slightly exceed budget, while operating expenses are expected to exceed the adopted budget by about $100,000. The bottom line impact is that the fund balance will total 29.9% of annual expenditures, falling just shy of fully funding the operating reserve policy, which targets 30%. Next slide, please. Moving on to the water fund, utility revenues through the third quarter have continued to trend ahead of projections due to increased water consumption. Third quarter consumption slowed measurably, but still exceeded the previous years for the same period by about 3%. Staff are proposing to increase the revenue projections by about $340,000 to account for the additional utility revenues. Additionally, the revised budget column reflects an increase in capital expenditures of about $313,000 for the Grant Street Water Improvements Project that was approved on tonight's consent calendar. The estimate to close column reflects that while revenues are anticipated to end the year in line with the amended budget, operating expenses are currently projected to end the year about $257,000 under budget, resulting in the water fund projected to fully fund both the reserve policy and the rate stabilization policy by the end of the current fiscal year. While this is great news, I would like to remind the council and the public that the city recently had to abandon progress on the ASR Wells project due to the grant program being canceled, and the alternative water security project at the Dry Creek well field was prioritized by council during goal setting, and it will require additional funding that is not included in the adopted budget in order to start in fiscal year 25-26. Next slide, please. Next up is the wastewater fund. Unlike water, utility revenue in the wastewater fund continues to trend in alignment with the adopted budget. The seasonal sewer average that determines residential customer wastewater usage for the entire year is currently being calculated for the upcoming year and will be reflected on the upcoming bills released later this month. Overall, there are no amendments proposed tonight, and the revenues are estimated to end the year approximately $58,000 over budget, and expenditures, including both operating and capital, are anticipated to end the year $146,000 under budget. As a result, the wastewater fund is also proposed to meet the entire operating reserve requirements and the rate stabilization reserve target in the current fiscal year. Next slide, please. Overall, revenues through the third quarter continue to trend high in the electric fund at 93% of the adopted budget. This is driven in part by electric consumption, increasing over the prior year by about 11% on average, and more significantly by the unbudgeted revenue received from the sale of renewable energy credits, which totaled $1.5 million through March. Staff are proposing to increase the revenue budget by about $466,000 to account for the increased utility rate revenue, but are proposing to hold off on budgeting the revenue from the renewable energy credit sales until the projects are identified to use those funds. The estimate to close column also reflects that in addition to the renewable energy credit revenue, operating expenditures are anticipated to end the year about $955,000 under budget, largely driven by budget savings from market power purchases. Overall, the fund is now anticipated to fully meet the 50% operating reserve policy and the $4 million capital reserve policy. However, it is important to note that the remaining working capital amount of $4.1 million includes the $1.5 million in revenue from the renewable energy credit sales that will continue to show as available working capital until the council appropriates these funds towards applicable projects. Next slide, please. And again, the proposed action tonight is to adopt a resolution approving amendments to the fiscal year 24-25 budget. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Katie. Questions? Ron?
Yeah, on the Recology, said that was down to 1%. What had that been trending in past years as an increase?
I don't know the exact increases, but I know that we have seen higher increases year over year in the past 2 years. And I think last year, I don't want to pull a number out of my head. I don't know the number, but it has been more significant than that. And based on the adopted rate increases that Recology had for this fiscal year, we were expecting closer to an 8 or 9% year over year increase. However, it has come in at about 1%.
And do we audit that, or we just take how does that work to verify that?
Yeah, so they
That's what I
provide, quarterly, they provide their supporting documentation that determines what their gross revenue is and their calculation for that. We have not audited them in the current years, but we certainly could.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Kelly, do you have any questions? I don't want to miss you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I had a question about the transient occupancy tax revenue. So I was curious, I know that we had looked at a proposal. I think it was kind of around the context of looking at the bond financing, I think is the context of the conversation from probably 2 years ago now. And I'm curious in terms of what we were looking at as a forecast for TOT, are we still kind of looking at TOT remaining relatively flat, but still kind of in line with those projections because the, I guess it's the Appalachian Hotel has not yet opened, and that's when we'll see some increase in that fund?
Yeah, so the projections that were done, they were done, I think, about 2 years or so by now. I think in fiscal year 23-24, that was the first time we started deviating. We really saw that reduction year over year in TOT revenue. And that was the first kind of event that put us off track to those projections, really kind of lowered them at this point. The second one, as you mentioned, the new hotels we do expect to come online that were incorporated in those projections are the Appalachian Hotel and the Duchamp Hotel that is being renovated across from City Hall. Both of those projects were delayed from their original expected opening dates. And so that was the second factor that, again, reduced a little bit of those projections. So we do still foresee those projects opening. The fiscal year 25-26 projected budget for TOT does account for both of those projects opening next year. So that reduction that we saw last year, of course, with increases, you do typically see those kind of compound year over year if they're trending up. So we're still going to be a little lower than our trends at that point in time 2 years ago. But there's nothing significant shocking the system that we don't think will continue in that direction.
Great, thanks so much.
So I have a question continuing on the TOT question. How do we track what's happening in the industry? Do we talk with the hoteliers and so on? Because I'm thinking that we're going to start to see a downward trend in that as well.
Yeah, so we do analysis in-house kind of, so the trendings that I shared during the presentation, those are mostly look back analyses. So we take, 5-year averages, seasonal trends. And we do have a good open communication relationship with the HTID and the Healdsburg Chamber of Commerce to try to get kind of their feel on the economic trends. However, it is largely everyone's kind of guessing for it. It's, you have to take your best guess at what it's going to be. And we do absolutely try to continue to communicate, especially with the opening of the hotels, as much information as we can get from those hotel owners to make sure that our projections are in alignment.
Great. Yeah, I know that's a difficult thing to know, but we know it's sort of on the horizon potentially, right? I just want to mention, all of our water funds, utility funds, this is a totally different report than we normally receive. So they're all in sounds like in really good shape at this point. Although I guess it's a little concerning that people are using a lot of water even now, right? So, do we have any plans for like a campaign again as the summer months are coming along and people are going to be watering their lawns? And that's a bit concerning to me.
This is, well, officially, this is, I've been told by our water folks, not a water conservation year, and that there was adequate rainfall. And there was sufficient supply in Lake Mendocino and Lake Sonoma, both of our main sources. So there's really no regional or larger scale call for conservation. Always, we try to put forth tips on conservation and promote the rebate programs and incentive programs we have to help people be more efficient. So that absolutely continues. So I don't want to give the impression that we've backed off trying to encourage conservation in the long run. You know, as you all understand, we have cross purposes here. In the short term, selling more water makes for a healthier water fund. It is not obviously though, in the long term, we're better off if we are water efficient. So we do put out information pretty regularly, and we'll continue to do that, and we'll continue to fund conservation programs. But we do not anticipate, absent something unexpected, a call for, you know, a certain percentage this year. By all accounts, the water supplies are okay.
Do we have, don't we have in our pricing, the more you use, you're paying a bit more for water now too? So that could be, I mean, that's intended to keep people to not overwater, right? So yeah, this is a pretty good report, it sounds like. Thank you for that. If there's no more questions from council, I'll open it up to public comment. Do we have anyone who would like to speak on our budget? I'm the only one who likes this, along with Katie, I think. Okay, so nobody coming up for public comment. So would someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion that we adopt a resolution approving amendments to the fiscal year 2024-25 budget.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so now we'll move on to the Laura Fish Summersall Park Phase 1 schematic design review with project manager Tom Campbell.
Mayor, well, he's coming up here. I need to recuse on this one because I live within 500 feet of the park you're going to be discussing.
Okay,
So I'll be outside. Let me know when you're ready for me to come back.
thank you.
And I have a perceived financial conflict of interest as I own property within 500 feet of the far edge of this park. So out of an abundance of caution, I will also be recusing on this item.
Okay, thank you. So it's up to the three of us here. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to start by introducing some of our design consultants that are participating virtually tonight. We have Lauren Ewald from Fletcher Studio. Fletcher Studio is our landscape architects who put together the master plan for the park. And we also have Brianna Morrison and Jim Fain from Carlisle Macy. They are civil engineers and creek restoration experts. So I'll be giving the presentation tonight, and they'll be available for questions after if needed. So just to start out, this first slide has an aerial image of the park site, the future park site, current park as it is today. The aerial image was taken just above the new fire substation looking east. You can see on the left hand of the image, Pasalacqua Road and the Montage Resort. In the center, the line of trees, that's the existing creek that leads to some wetland areas that you can see on the right-hand side of that image. And then upper right towards the back is the Parkland Farms neighborhood, and Barbieri Park, an existing park. Next slide, please. This is the master plan image. This master plan was the result of a very robust community engagement and outreach and involvement effort. It included the Parks Design Team group that we call the Parks Design Team, about 30 community members who met 13 times throughout the planning process to help guide the project. We also had 11 focus group work sessions and a couple of open house events. Just as a reminder, the the development of this park, which will be about 38 acres in total, is required by the development agreement for the Sajo Hills project. And the park will be developed in multiple phases due to cost and available funding. The City Council approved a CEQA addendum and this final master plan in August 2023. But just to remind you and anyone watching about what's included in the master plan, a quick walkthrough starting with probably what would be most recognizable is the athletic fields, what's called sports fields in this drawing. Those are just north of the fire substation. And right near the fire substation is also where the multi-use trail would start. That in this drawing is a yellow line that continues kind of from left to right across the site. Another line you'll see is a blue line. That's the creek, which would be restored. A portion of it has already been restored by the developer. To the right of the sports fields is a parking lot and a structure that would include restrooms, concession stand, storage. That parking lot is connected to a road that kind of goes to the south towards the Parkland Farms neighborhood. That's a vehicular bridge that crosses the creek, and that road is a vehicular connection to Saddle Draw in Parkland Farms. You'll see the community park component there just below the parking lot. That includes picnic pavilion, sports courts, playgrounds, things of that nature. And that connects to the existing Barbieri Park, which you can see there labeled at the bottom. And then to the right, the multi-use trail continues. There's some wetlands. Above the wetlands is a BMX pump track. Those wetlands are existing, as are other wetlands on site in this drawing labeled as stormwater features. And then there's an open space area that has some trails and some open space. I think that covers everything there. Next slide, please. This is a quick summary of some of the recent actions that the council has taken related to the park. So as I mentioned, in August 2023, the council approved the CEQA addendum and the final master plan for the park. In May 24, the council directed that the first phase of the park's development include the multi-purpose trail or multi-use trail, the creek restoration, parking and support facilities like a restroom, infrastructure like utilities and stormwater treatment facilities that would be for the first phase of development as well as for future phases. And other park amenities as funding allows, including a modest sports component. In October 24, the City Council voted to name the future park after Laura Fish Summersall. Laura Fish Summersall was a Native American woman, a world-famous basket maker, a national leader, linguist, and educator of California Indian culture. And then in December of 2024, the council approved a professional services agreement with Fletcher Studio for the schematic design work that went into this schematic design for the first phase of construction. Next slide, please. This slide details the available funding and the estimated available budget for the first phase of development of the park. There are several different funding sources, including funding from the Sonoma County Agriculture and Open Space District. These are matching grant funds from the district in the amount of $1 million. There are also several contributions that are listed here that came from the developer, the resort developer, and a couple things to note on here. One is that there's an affordable housing grant, $409,000. This is a portion of a state grant that the affordable housing developer was awarded. That developer is Freebird Development Company. They informed us that a portion of their grant could be used towards the multi-use trail component of the master plan and the park project. They told us that shortly into schematic design, and we had a conversation and thought it made a lot of sense to to apply that towards the multi-use trail and then take the funding that an equal amount of funding that the city anticipated putting towards a multi-use trail and apply that towards the construction of a parking lot and trailhead for the Healdsburg Ridge. And I can explain more about that later, but we're currently working with Freebird to draft a grant agreement to be a subrecipient to their state grant. Another thing to note on this slide is that we have some costs incurred to date, of course. Those include costs for the CEQA addendum and the schematic design work that is currently in process. And we also have just a note that the 5-year capital improvement program reflected bond proceeds of $5 million in fiscal year 26-27. However, due to changing market conditions, there are no current plans to proceed with a bond issuance to support funding phase 1 of the project. A primary goal of phase 1 is to deploy funds that are currently available to construct essential infrastructure that will pave the way for subsequent phases of the park. Next slide, please. This graphic, I think everyone's seen a couple times now, but just as a reminder, we developed a master plan. That's kind of like the big idea for the park. And that was approved. Right now we're doing schematic design, which really starts to refine some of the concepts in that big idea and assign cost estimates to different components so that we can start to figure out what is feasible with the budget and funding that we have available. And then the next steps would be to develop construction drawings and go out to bid and then proceed with construction. Next slide, please. So the consultant team started the schematic design process and all of the associated work in January of 2025 at the beginning of this year. And they really focused on those components that the council directed to include in phase 1. So this is their scope exhibit. Here you can see the different elements called out that we focused on. You can see the trail in yellow. The trail has 4 different creek crossings, which are bridges. Those are in blue. You can see the restroom, the parking lot, and then also some trail connections to the Parkland Farms neighborhood and to the Northwest Trail, which is an existing trail on the resort property that the developer completed that can't be opened until parking is available for access to it. And then you can also see on the top right here, there's a what is labeled as a offsite trailhead. That is the trailhead for the Healdsburg Ridge, which we did do some schematic design work for. This image really shows how interconnected that trailhead is as a project and in terms of construction with the affordable housing that would be built. You can see there in that image just north. In fact, the trailhead and the affordable housing would share a driveway, and there are a lot of efficiencies that are associated with constructing that when the affordable housing is constructed. So that's a major reason that we thought we would include that in this schematic design work and try to utilize some of that state grant funding from Freebird. And I think that covers everything. So we started to kind of do the do the schematic design work, and at about 90% completion, we did a cost estimate, and that's on the next slide. So we had an initial cost estimate completed for all of the components that were designed, and that came back at about $9.5 million, which is unfortunately more than what we have available. So we kind of took a pause and as a team revisited the schematic design and looked at things that maybe could change to help us in terms of reducing costs. I won't go through everything in this table, but a couple things to sort of highlight that helped us to get to that point was putting EV capable spaces in the parking lot instead of putting actual EV charging stations. EV meaning electric vehicle. And we also switched out the vehicular bridge that would connect the main parking lot and cross over the creek. We replaced it with a bicycle and pedestrian bridge in the same location. And that helped reduce some costs as well. And next slide, please. We did look at some other considerations during the process, of course, as directed. One of the things that we looked into were additional park amenities as funding allows. We looked into modest sports component, possibly the picnic pavilion, sports courts, and pretty quickly determined that there was insufficient funding at this time to include those components as part of the first phase of construction for this park. We also did look into including a playground, and we were doing that, and we also, through a resident, a community member here in Healdsburg, we were connected with a nonprofit organization called the Magical Bridge Foundation. They're a nonprofit organization that creates inclusive playgrounds, and it seems like they do some really great work. We are in communication with them and trying to get more information. But one of the things we did learn is that their destination playgrounds typically range from $2 million to $5 million. And so at this time, we don't have a playground included in phase 1 of the schematic design just because of funding issues. I do know that having a Magical Bridge playground in Healdsburg is on the list of City Council's potential goals for the upcoming fiscal year. So it's something we'll continue to explore, possibly focusing on Badger Park, which seems like it might be a better option. We also looked at costs for the picnic area, which in the master plan and in that process was referred to as Picnic Island. We did include it in our cost estimate at the 90% schematic design stage, and that came back at about $670,000. So unfortunately, we don't have sufficient funding for that either at this time to include in phase 1. Next slide, please. And this is just some additional information about the Healdsburg Ridge open space parking and trailhead. So we have that additional funding from the Affordable Housing Project from their grant funds. Just a reminder that there's some construction and cost efficiencies. The 90% schematic design cost estimate for that component is $992,000 or so. And so we're thinking that we would include the trailhead and parking as a bid alternate, one of several. So I'll explain later on the other bid alternates and what we would include in the base bid. Next slide, please. So this is our phase 1 schematic design. This includes the multi-use trail, the main parking in the park, a restroom and gathering area, the creek restoration, the bridge, and a couple of trail connections. And the bid alternates would be the restroom at the main parking lot in the park, the open space, the Healdsburg Ridge open space parking and trailhead, and a restroom over at the open space parking as well. Just a couple things to note in terms of to help you understand, since it's hard with this image to sort of grasp what all is included. The multi-purpose trail would include 3,208 linear feet of trail. That's a 10-foot wide trail paved with 1.5 feet of gravel shoulders on either side. The bridge crossings, so we have in the schematic design 3 bike and pedestrian bridges that cross the creek, and then we have 1 pedestrian-only bridge crossing. It's right towards the center there near Montage Way, so it would connect the multi-use trail to the existing trail that parallels the road up to Montage. The creek restoration, we have 860 feet of creek restoration that will be similar in design to the creek restoration that's already been completed. The main parking lot has 44 spaces, including 15 electric vehicle capable spaces. And that parking lot would also have a connection to the Northwest Trail, that other trail that has not yet been opened on the Montage property. The park restroom, which is next to the main parking lot, has 2 stalls and a gathering area next to it. That design would allow for the building to be expanded in the future. So when we build the sports complex and the fields, we can expand that building to add to it a concession stand and storage and things like that. And then the Healdsburg Ridge open space parking trailhead, that includes 16 parking spaces and a 1-stall restroom. Next slide, please. This is a more illustrative image of the schematic design. You can see right in the center there the main parking lot and the creek restoration adjacent to it, the pedestrian bridge that would go over the restored creek, and that would connect to a pedestrian trail that would go down to the Parkland Farms neighborhood to Saddle Draw. One thing to note that I didn't mention is that, in this schematic design work, we start to really figure out things in terms of dimensions and what fits and where things actually are. And the master plan called for a vehicular connection to Parkland Farms. And we realized that the existing wetland at the end of Saddle Draw prevents that unless we were to do significant wetland mitigation. And so what we're showing in our schematic design is a pedestrian connection to that neighborhood instead. And you can see in this, it's a little hard to see, but the creek restoration would include some really nice improvements, including a high flow ledge. So it would allow people to get close to the water when the creek is flowing. And we think that would be a really nice thing. We'd also have rock weirs and logs and boulders and reinforced banks like you see out there in the restored portions of the creek. You can see it's a little small, but there's a graphic image of the restroom in the top right there. We're planning to design that using some of the design aesthetics that are already in place out in Saggio Hills. So, similar in style to the fire substation, the water pump house, some of the materiality of the Montage Resort with lots of stone and metal. At the bottom right, you can see, so we have the 4 different creek crossings, which are bridges. Right now, we're proposing to have them be Corten steel material or something similar to the image at the bottom right there. Next slide, please. And this graphic also just shows a selection of the materiality for various components throughout the site. Also some ideas for different types of green infrastructure that we could use and different planting materials as well. Next slide, please. And so this is our proposed project design direction. We are thinking that we would have a base bid that would include the multi-purpose trail, the bridge crossings, the creek restoration, and the main parking lot. And that would all be in the base of our bid solicitation. And then we would have several bid alternates, and we would include those so that we could get cost separately for those components and include them if we had funding to do so in the bid award. So those bid alternates would include the park restroom, the Healdsburg Ridge parking and trailhead, and the Healdsburg Ridge restroom. Next slide, please. So these are some next steps. Just looking forward, with your direction, we would return on June 16th with a contract to engage Fletcher Studio in design development work, developing construction drawings, and for their support services during bidding. And then we would return later with a formal budget amendment that would increase the project budget by that $409,000 and allow us to enter into an agreement with Freebird to be a subrecipient of their state grant. We would also return with the conservation easement, the recreation covenant, and the grant agreement that are required to accompany the matching grant funds from Sonoma County Ag and Open Space District. We're working on those currently with the district. And we're continuing to work with Sherry Smith Ferry. She's the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer with the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians on the some interpretive elements in the park, some artistic elements, and also some planting programs in the park. And we, as staff, will continue to interface with the Arts and Culture Commission during the design development stage about the incorporation of art and artistic approaches during the design development process. Next slide, please. And this is just a very brief timeline. So we're looking at doing the design development, working on construction documents through the end of the year, and then hopefully going out to bid in January 2026 in the new year, and then starting construction shortly thereafter for phase 1. Next slide, please. The recommended action tonight is to approve the schematic design for Laura Fish Summersall Park phase 1 and direct staff to proceed with preparing a contract for design development, construction drawings, and bidding support.
Thank you. Do we have questions from council? Councilmember Edwards.
On the lighting, and going through that, it said that you had looked at raising the height of the light poles to reduce it. Is there any type of public safety concern? Is there requirements for ADA? Is there night sky requirements that were considered in that or were thinking in that? And lastly, are there hours of operations of the lighting?
So our consultants can help me out here, but what we did when we raised the height of the poles is basically we can provide the same amount of light with fewer light fixtures by having higher poles. And so all of it will be done. We have a really great environmental consultant who's part of the design team who is helping us out with questions like the night sky or dark sky, and doing everything in a very thoughtful way. And then Lauren, maybe you could answer what may or may not be required for lighting.
I think it's a lighting zone. I want to say it's lighting zone 2, and I'm a landscape architect, so I'm speaking on behalf of our electrical engineer, but it's definitely not like an urban setting where you have to have a 1-foot candle max or like a really brightly lit thing. And so I don't know that this is still in what was ultimately priced, but we've talked about having the system. It's not expensive though, having the system on dimmers and motion sensors. And so it's activated when someone comes along the trail, and it's not glaring into the sky, but it's also it's a safety thing because if you live nearby or you're driving nearby, it should be dark if it's 2 a.m. But if you see it lit up, then you know that there's someone out there, which is a plus for sure.
And do we have any concerns from our police chief on that?
No concerns, but we still do need to as it goes through when we get to that point.
All right, thank you.
Vice Mayor, I had a couple of questions. This phase 1 is clearly what it just states. Phase 1. It's just really kind of getting this started, right? I guess my question is, I think there are some funds that are required, there are certain things that are required with some of the funding that we have, yes? Like the parking lot,
The multi-use trail for
Okay.
sure, and the creek restoration are required. The parking lot would be required to provide access to that existing trail at Montage, the Northwest Trail. Without parking, that would remain closed. And then in terms of what else is actually required, I think a lot of those contributions can be used in different ways, despite there's like, for example, the crosswalk contribution, and that's it can be, we'll provide a crosswalk across Parkland Farms Boulevard, but those funds are kind of more malleable, I guess.
okay. And then the parking lot that we're talking about for the trailhead we need before that can be used. Is that the one where we're going to do the EV and now we're just going to make it EV ready? Or are there two parking lots?
There's the two parking lots. The one that we switched from installing EV chargers to making EV capable is the main parking lot. So that larger parking lot kind of in the middle of the park site.
And is that part of phase one?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then this may be a stupid question, but what's involved in the creek restoration? What do we do with that?
Well, Brianna is on the call. She worked on that design and she can probably explain best.
Sure. Hi there, Brianna with Carlo Macy. The creek restoration is trying to achieve a few things. There will be impacts to the existing end of, it's really a tributary to Foss Creek that flows into the north entry area detention basin. And so it was channelized back in the 90s when that detention basin was put in. And so as part of the construction of the park, we will renaturalize that section, so put some bends in it so it's not just this kind of straight channel, and we will respond to any impacts to the renaturalization of that creek. So by building the parking lot, we'll have to do some grading and that will push the creek flow line. So we'll want to restabilize those banks. We want to maintain the capacity of that end of the creek as it flows into the detention basin. And then we also want to mitigate for the impacts we're doing with new naturalized plantings. And then obviously we want to make it amenity for the park. So Tom mentioned the high flow ledges, which will be an opportunity for people to get down closer to the water, since it's just has water in it certain times of the year. When it's very low flowing, you could be sort of disconnected from it, and those high flow ledges will allow people to get a little closer to the water. And in a high flow event, when we have a big rainstorm, it can still maintain the capacity to move water into that detention basin. So it'll be, to summarize, stabilizing the creek banks, renaturalizing it, providing new naturalized plantings, and then creating a recreational amenity for people.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. No? So we'll open this up to public comment at this point. Anybody like to speak? Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Council. My name is John Thomas. I live across Healdsburg Avenue from the proposed park in Enzo Village. And so I'm actually here tonight for our dog population. We have a fair number of dogs in Enzo, over 30 at the moment. And if you know Enzo Village and its site, it's pretty much built out. We really have very little room on site to accommodate the dogs. We're going to try to see if we can't squeeze in a small dog run area, but it's really only going to be for small dogs. So in looking at the plan, what I would ask, and it's in support, I support the project, but consider perhaps as a bid alternate, the idea of including the dog run area in the first phase. I'm not sensing that a dog run area is going to be a high capital cost. I may be incorrect in that, but there isn't too much infrastructure that goes into a dog run area. Because we're also expecting, as the North Village expands, we have a mixed use development there with some apartments that will be completed later this year, and then a condominium development as well, the hotel. Our dog population will probably increase with all those things. And I thought there was going to be a dog area right next to the fire department. I thought there were 2 dog run areas, but I'm only seeing one in the plan now. But in any case, I hope as you develop the schematic plans, if you find that the funds, you may have more funds than you might have thought in terms of implementing the first phase, that you would consider that as something that would be factored in and included earlier rather than later. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing anybody get up. Okay, so we'll close public comment and bring it back for direction from council.
I just had a question. I mean, do you have an idea of what the dog run would cost, that component of the master plan?
The master plan includes what we refer to as a off-leash. I have to look at the graphic. I think it's called a off-leash area.
Dog play?
It would be part of the open space. It's not really constructed. It's more of an idea, and it hasn't really been fully explored to my knowledge, but it would be an off-leash area in the open space, kind of on the eastern side of the park, where you would be near the trails, where you could bring your dog and let your dog off leash in that part of the park. Is that right, Mark?
Director Theming?
If I could. There actually were two off-leash areas proposed in the master plan. One was directly, as the resident noted, adjacent to the fire station. It was intended to be like a small dog park, like at Badger Park. The other areas, as Tom mentioned, is more of an open area, a place for people to bring their dogs off leash legally as they hike trails versus on our open space where they're doing it illegally all over. The cost for the dog park renovations, which did not include fencing, but were fairly extensive, were in excess of $600,000 at Fitch Mountain, if I understand correctly. But there may be ways to do things on an interim basis with, temporary fencing or components like that. So if council's interested, we could look at that without committing to anything, with the understanding it would probably be temporary. And that gets tricky when it comes to dog parks and ownership and how people love their dog parks. And so I think we'd want to spend a little bit of time talking about this with the design team before we committed that we could actually do something, because they are very special places to owners and their dogs. So if that helps.
It's hard to switch gears, is what you're saying. If we get something set up and going, even if it's sort of provisional, people are going to fall in love with that and not want it to be what it ought to be ultimately. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, we did that fairly effectively at Badger Park during the construction of the dog park. We had temporary fencing that we installed. Interestingly, as much as people appreciated that, we also received a lot of complaints from people who thought it disturbed the area. And I think it's something that we would need to talk about more as a design team, whether that's realistic and what we could provide. Does it have to be ADA compliant? How would we fence it? Would we fence it? You go to San Francisco and some of their parks in their urban area are not fenced, and they have off-leash dog areas, which I think is interesting. So it's an interesting question, and I can certainly see the need from the folks who live in the North Village development. But we need a little bit of time to explore that further.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No. So do we have a motion? Do we need a motion for this to approve?
No.
No. So we can
just need to make sure that staff has everything he needs.
Okay, so does the council agree and we're saying approve the schematic design for the park phase 1 and direct you to proceed with preparing a contract for design development, construction drawings, and bidding support? Do we have support from council on that?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Proceed, please. And if I could just say one more thing about the dog parks. My husband drives our dog to the Badger Park Dog Park every day, and yeah, people are pretty, ownership of the dog park is really important to them. I know that it's a drive, but there is the Villa Dog Park and there's that one. So, and they're beautiful. So in the meantime, maybe you could use those. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Okay, so we can, Councilmember Kelly can come back and so can Councilmember Hagley. Welcome back. Okay, so we're going to move on then to the selection of an official city flower, plant, or tree. Mark Themig.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. It's kind of a fun project we get to work on. So next slide, please. So this is an outcome of your fiscal year 24-25 goals when you had a representative of the Healdsburg Garden Club come forward and suggest maybe the city should consider adopting an official flower, plant, and or tree. And so you added that to your goals for the year. So we're here to follow up on that. Next slide, please. So as part of this, staff asked if the garden club would be interested in being part of the process since it came from them. And 2 community members, Teresa Winstrom from the garden club, who's here tonight, who's going to talk a little bit about the recommendations, as well as her friend, Wendy Smith, who's part of the Native Plant Society, who brings a lot of expertise on native plants into this conversation, will be able to provide insight onto the candidates that are out there for your consideration. Next slide, please. So there were some considerations that went into this. I had the chance to meet with Ms. Winstrom a few times to talk on the phone, and we kind of talked about 2 general guiding considerations. The first, and probably the most important, is that it should be native to the Healdsburg area. What I learned in this process is obviously a lot of plants that may have been native at one time, as development occurred, their landscape and their ecology was replaced with something else, whether it was a home or street or garden. So we talked about that, and that was a limiting factor. Since the city does own 2 open spaces, kind of uncommon for a city, which are adjacent to the city limits, we expanded that search area a bit to provide additional considerations for plants that were native or are native, but maybe just right outside the city limits on property that the city owned. The second was can you go back one slide, please? The second was that it really should have some kind of value, and it could be expressed in any number of ways. Natural beauty was pretty easy. Some kind of pollinator or a protector for another animal or plant. It enhances the environment used by indigenous people or people today. Historically, economically, or socially important. You'll hear one candidate that has an economic interest. And then lastly, potentially threatened or endangered. So those are some of the site considerations. Next slide, please. There are examples out there. Obviously, state of California, our state flowers, the poppy. Other cities have different options. Dahlia, San Francisco. Los Angeles has 2 species that are not native, which I thought was interesting. Santa Rosa has a tree. I could not find other examples of cities in Sonoma County that had an actual flower or tree other than Santa Rosa, but it could be out there. Next slide, please. So with this, if I could, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Ms. Winstrom and Ms. Smith to talk about the recommendations.
All right, this is Anya. Go ahead.
Hello. Okay. First of all, I have to say that choosing a favorite plant is kind of like choosing your favorite child. You know, there's a lot of choices and they're all good. They're all, you know, have their good sides and their not so good sides. So what we decided to do was not give you one recommendation, but give you some options. And like Mark said, we looked for perhaps a tree, a shrub, or a wildflower. And I should also say that when we were talking about our parameters, that we wanted to include some kind of recognition of Indigenous value. And I used for a lot of my recommendations, a book that's called Enough for All, and it's written by the cousin of Sherry Smith, which is you mentioned earlier tonight. This was very valuable. It talks about how they used the native plants for their food sources and how they never felt hungry because they had these available. So with that, we can go on to the candidates that we recommend to you. And we'll start out with the really pretty ones. We'd have the next slide, please. So a plant that grows here, you can find it around the city, is a native iris. And there's a Douglas iris, and there's a cousin of the Douglas iris, which is called the Iris macrosiphon. It's a smaller plant, but it grows very well here. It's more adaptable to inland areas, whereas the Douglas iris is more prevalent along the coast. But we have both here, and so as you can see in our report, the plants bloom from March to about May. You might be able to see some around now, and they're fairly good size. It holds cultural significance for Native American tribes. And ecologically, the native iris served as a water source for native bees. They attract pollinators and support wildlife, including insects and hummingbirds. So that's your first choice. And for the next slide, we have another candidate we can propose to you. It's the yellow Mariposa lily that is found, we've seen it up at the in Healdsburg Ridge area. And it's a beautiful yellow flower that you can't miss when you see it in the fields. It grows in very dry, grassy areas, which is the Healdsburg Ridge is good for that. And they should be coming out to bloom pretty soon. And the bulbs of this plant were used as the staple food for Native Americans, including the Pomo and the Miwok. And they can be eaten, kind of similar to a potato. And it hosts various insects. It hosts and provides a habitat source for animals. And so there's your second choice. That's a Calochortus luteus. And another very pretty candidate is the scarlet fritillary. And it's a bright red plant with a yellow center, and the stamens and the sepals are red and yellow. So it's a pretty showy plant. It's kind of a bell-shaped. And it's found throughout Sonoma County, but it's also in some of our hillsides. It blooms in March. It's between 1 and 3 feet tall. And it's not edible, but culturally, this is a bulb-forming perennial. It's in the lily family, and it symbolizes springtime and renewal. And it's also a host plant for insects, including caterpillars. And probably you've all seen examples of candidate number 4, which is blue-eyed grass. It's not really a grass, it's in the iris family. And it's a very nice wildflower. It flowers from January through July, so it's still available to see this year. And the Native Americans utilized the roots and leaves for these for medicinal purposes, including the treatment of stomach aches. The Spanish settlers in early California made a tea from this plant. And in the folklore, this bloom symbolizes the secrets and quiet exchange of knowledge. So those are our choices for wildflowers for you to choose from. We also propose consideration of the California native grape. And I know that Healdsburg is very, into the grape thing, and we're famous for that. But we can't overlook that it's native in the area. It has provided rootstock for pretty much all of the plants, grapes in the world, because the rootstock has made these plants, the grafted ones, resistant to phylloxera, which wiped out the grape industry in the early 1900s. So, we've got it growing naturally right here. So it's one that I think is very important culturally for the community, economically for the community, and it's also a source of food for wild animals, birds. The bees love the flowers in the spring. It turns into a beautiful red color in the fall, and it's also great for butterflies. As far as a tree goes, the most important tree, almost one of the most important trees in the United States are oaks. And Healdsburg has its share of oaks here. You just walk down the city trails we have here, and you see coastal live oak and valley oaks, and there's blue oaks around, and there's hybrids of oaks. So that's another thing to be considered. Ecologically, oaks serve as a food source for wildlife, and a lot of vertebrate, invertebrate animals they use it for a habitat. In the past, for indigenous people provided food for them with acorn bread and acorn soup. So that's it. So in summary, in the next slide, we have our 6 candidates for you to ask questions on or to talk about. You've got the native iris, you've got the yellow Mariposa lily, scarlet fritillary, the blue-eyed grass, California native grape, or an oak tree. So I don't know if you have any questions or comments or.
Council, questions? Questions, Ron?
In looking at the oak trees, there's like it's really indicative of Northern California is the oak tree. And is there one, I know further north, the silver oak is very prevalent. Is there an oak that's more prevalent, more suited to Healdsburg environment than any of the other ones? Or just we're looking at it as oak as a group?
Well, I don't know whether you have comment on that, but.
The amazing thing is how many that we do have native to Healdsburg. Probably the live oak, which is the one that doesn't lose its leaves, is the most common and the most, it's you see it the most. But some of the other ones, the valley oaks and the blue oaks are also very common.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
I assume, especially in the case of the flowers, that there might be a want to or an opportunity to plant some of these as our city plant. What's your recommendation in terms of what's going to be the most likely to succeed? If we start planting them in flower gardens around the town.
Well, I would think the iris would be the most easily to propagate and grow in your gardens or around.
Yeah, the fritillaries are absolutely knockout gorgeous, but they are really wild plants. They are harder to propagate and to grow. The iris, there's many different colors. They're very drought resistant. They form nice mats that look great in gardens, both public gardens and private gardens.
The blue-eyed grass, I know the Native Plant Society grows blue-eyed grass, and those seem to be fairly easy to propagate.
Yeah, and they'll just spread on their own. I'm sure you've seen them out in the hills. They're everywhere.
The iris, the Douglas iris and the macrosiphon are much more showy, I think, for gardens than the blue-eyed grass. But again, what's more valuable is kind of hard to say.
Thank you. I found the whole presentation was really interesting, and I really appreciate all the different facets for each plant that you presented to us. Thank you.
Councilmember Kelly, did you have any questions?
I just wanted to say thank you so much for this research that you conducted and putting forward these ideas. And I've been contemplating, this is definitely something outside of my professional area of expertise, but wonderful that we have these options of native flowers. And so I'm wondering, I don't know, colleagues, if there's an interest in doing something to poll our community to get other folks to weigh in and help us make this important decision. But I feel like we have a lot of really good options in front of us, and they're all beautiful. But I don't know if we'd want to use this maybe as an opportunity to also ask the community what their thoughts are, since we have these great proposals from the Garden Club. But I'm happy to make take a vote tonight as well if we have a consensus, but just thought I would throw that out there. Thanks.
Thank you. If we don't have any other questions, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate the research that you did on. It's really fascinating on, certain ones jump out to me personally is the first one, the iris, and then the blue-eyed grass. Those are the two that kind of popped out. But then I think, in some of the comments that came from here is, okay, if we're going to be planting these, I saw a reel, I think it's the Healdsburg School for the Parade is going to be handing out seeds, I think, in different, garden clubs. If in that context, kind of the question that I would look at is, okay, what, kind of like you were saying, if this is going to be planted, what is it, for handing out, here's the official seed of Healdsburg that we want to see. I like the thought that the iris is drought resistant. I liked how you tied in some of the history on the various plants. So it's not as simple as, oh, let's go pick a flower, which obviously then kind of the wrong term to use is pick a flower, because we don't necessarily want to pick them, but select. But that's kind of the direction I'm leaning on these. And then in terms of the oak tree, I appreciate the question about the different types. There's a preschool here called Live Oak, which is kind of cool that it's, local, but I'd be curious, kind of to get the feedback from my council members too, when we bring this back for discussion is, what do we do with this once we select these? Like what's the, what's the goal with that? What are the positives? How can we bring the community in? Like, what are the fun things that can go along with this? So those are just kind of my thoughts. And the last one is, what would you pick?
Teresa.
Didn't you already tell us you thought the iris, I think?
Well, if you're talking wildflowers, iris.
Yeah.
But my first choice of all of the plants is the California native grape.
Oh,
because
okay.
it's so important in this area. And it's, what other town in the United States can claim this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they could, maybe a few, but we've got a good claim on it.
Yeah.
I did want to add that when you're mentioning that, you made a comment about that's the rootstock for pretty much all the grapes. And that, to me, kind of spoke to how kind of Healdsburg is in terms of, we're kind of a leader. We do some cool things that really impact larger areas. And so that kind of was interesting. And I mean, it is where's our logo? It is in our logo.
I know, yeah, you wouldn't have to change your stationery. But there's nothing wrong with deciding on a tree, the vine and a flower. You don't have to just zero in on one.
Go ahead.
I'm particularly attracted to your comments about how the Native American culture around here used some of these plants more than others. And for me, why that's important, I think, is that it kind of strengthens our sense of natural history and in the connection of place. So to know that these particular plants were really integral to the lives of people who lived here for millennia. And I think that's an important thing to focus on. I mean, there's a lot of different things to look at, of course, but with that in mind, the ones that kind of came forward to me were the oak, the blue-eyed grass, and the lily. Those comments seem to be strongest in that regard.
The yellow lily, the Mariposa lily?
The yellow one, yeah.
That's beautiful.
I want to open this up to public comment before we finish up here. Would anybody like to speak on this topic? We have one person. No? Yes? Come on up, Marilyn. Welcome.
Thank you, Marilyn Joyce. Oh, what a great subject. I really agree with Vice Mayor Herod. I wrote some notes here. The idea that that we choose something that's integral to Native culture, that has a history to it. I love valley oaks, but I don't know if they're indigenous in the same way that tan oaks are. Tan oaks are kind of considered a weed, but they have been really important to some Native, I suppose it would be the Pomo, because it's further north. I'm not sure. And I also thought the same thing about the yellow Mariposa lily having an edible tuber. Oh, geez. Tuber. I love Douglas iris, and I grow some that I thought were Douglas iris, but they have a really horrible name, but they're really quite beautiful. I think it's something like, rotten meat iris or something like that, and I don't know why they don't smell. So I guess in terms of input, since I'm the only one that stood up, I would like it to have some history. As someone asked me years ago if I would redesign imaginatively the Healdsburg logo, and of course we took an oak leaf and replaced the grape leaf. The only concern I would have about the grape leaf is that properties in the Healdsburg area that have vineyards right now are not selling. In fact, I understand it's a liability to get them sold, so I don't know where grapes are going, but I like the idea that they were used in baskets. So I haven't answered your question at all, but you asked, so thank you.
Yes, we did. Thank you. I don't see anyone else in the audience, so I'll bring this back for comment. If I could just make a comment too. I mean, I love your presentation and this topic. Thank you very much. I kind of think that maybe the idea of doing a survey of the community of this might be an appropriate time to do that, because I think we all maybe have a different idea of which flower we want at this point. At least I like the grape leaf. You like anyway. Just I'd like to agree with Councilmember Kelly on that. Maybe that possibility. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I could definitely benefit from some more input on this. I guess the question would be for our city manager, what's involved in that kind of undertaking, what kind of form this would take, so that's not a huge lift for everybody.
Yeah, I think there's different ways we could do it. If you're thinking a predominantly online survey, it's really not all that big a lift. Obviously, then the trick is how do we get it out to as many people as possible, but I think we're pretty good at that. I think we could probably, so I don't think it's a huge lift. If there's a little bit of patience for time to develop that and give people a chance to respond. We always want to catch people that aren't comfortable in the online realm too, so we could probably come up with a paper version and have that strategically placed in a few places. So it would take a bit of time, but I certainly, in the grand scheme of things, not a massive lift. Mark, please speak now if you disagree or have any concerns.
I'm on board.
And then
Yeah, I think something easy, and I know there's, Instagram surveys or, and then doing something at the senior center or however else, like something that is not a huge staff lift, but I mean, something online where people can see these, these flowers in color with just like a couple bullet points on it, and then people could just vote, I think would be great. I wouldn't mind doing a tree and flowers, so, maybe which oak tree, but I mean, if we're just picking one, that I'm open to that. But yeah, I'm open to hearing from the public, and then I guess whatever comes out number one, is that automatically we're going to choose it, or what works there?
makes it easier.
I guess we should just, agree that all these suggestions are good in case the one we didn't like won, right? I mean, I think they're all good. These
Yeah.
are really excellent suggestions, and the bullets that were provided are very concise and meaningful. So I think we've got a lot to go on right there in terms of what we present to the public. But if someone says, no, I really don't want to have the whatever, then I guess this is the time to say it. But otherwise, I think this is a good plan to do an online survey.
Without overcomplicating things, just, to my point earlier about, okay, and then what do we do? Like, what's the after when we select, say, a flower? Is the goal then, all right, we want to see more of these planted, or, seed giveaways, or are we changing logos and stationery? Like, are we just picking one to add to a list for some other city when they contemplate this, or is there something that we might do with that?
Well, I think the answer is clear. It's a festival, right? Another event? No, I'm just kidding. No, I think it would be fun. I mean, I think it's something, it's a really positive thing, I think, for the community. I love the idea of handing out seeds during the parade or whatever the case, and we can figure that piece of it out. But I do think there's an opportunity to make this really about, Healdsburg and do something, but not a festival.
I hope that the community is listening, and I agree with the vice mayor that the Mariposa lily and the blue-eyed grass really, particularly after talking about the park, access to open space, really tying those are not just pretty, but they provided substance to the native culture. And to me, that was extremely important to know that the tubers on the Mariposa lily taste like potatoes. I mean, it would be a really good, those two are great choices, and hopefully we can get the community to buy in on that.
Mariposa lily, and which is the other one?
The blue-eyed grass.
And I think they said they eat like potatoes. I don't know that they taste like potatoes necessarily, but did she?
Have you had one?
Councilmember Kelly, did you want to weigh in on this again before we go on?
No, I think I love the idea of doing a survey. I think this is a fun and creative way to engage the community. And I agree with the comments around, having something that is meaningful and gives a sense of place, is a great way to honor the history and those who've been here before us. And I look forward to hearing what the community has to say, and hopefully people will weigh in, and then we'll get that information and come back and make a decision.
Thank you. So are we okay with, is everybody okay with the survey first idea? And then second, with all of the recommendations to be included for people to choose from? We don't want to eliminate anything necessarily? Okay. Yes.
We're just going into Tuesdays on the Plaza. I mean, we've done enough of these where we have like maybe big poster boards, people put stickers and so they can kind of say, oh, help pick the flower or something. Be kind of fun.
We can make it a
Just a
theme
thought.
night.
All right.
We'll find a way. I do want to thank Ms. Wistrom and Ms. Smith for their help with this. It was fun
Absolutely.
working
Thank
with
you.
them. Thank you.
And Mary
Good.
Kelly for mentioning it, for bringing it to our attention.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we move on to Public Works Director Larry Simmer, Sonoma County Transportation and Climate Authority Project Priority List.
And now for something completely different.
A little bit, yeah.
Yes, we're here to talk about the upcoming call for projects and what the city's priority projects are. Next slide, please. The action for tonight is either to support staff's recommended project list or provide alternative direction. Next slide, please. So in 2021, SCTA, which is now SCTCA, so forgive me, it's Sonoma County Transportation Authority, or adding climate as the two agencies, which are really under one roof, merge into one. Forgive me if I jump back and forth a little bit. This call for projects did not combine grants, but coordinated multiple funding sources into one single call, making it more efficient primarily for SCTA, in that we apply at one time for a bunch of grants as opposed to every individual agency applying for each individual grant. This way SCTA can kind of look at all of these county's needs, priorities as a whole, and then align the best funding for all of them. It gave SCTA a little bit more control over things, but it has worked out pretty well. In 2021, we applied for the 5 projects shown on the screen: Grove Street, Dry Creek, March Avenue, Mill Street, and Ward Street. Next slide, please. We did quite well. We received $2.5 million for Grove Street, which, as you know, is in design right now, anticipating construction in early 2026. We received $1.2 million for Ward Street, which has not progressed as well. There was originally some funding from a different funding source for the scoping of that project, which we ultimately didn't move forward with because it was going to tie us to federal funding, and federalizing a project is quite expensive, and the amount of money we had was very small, if you remember. And really, we've been busy with other things. We are moving forward with March, and the other projects are moving well, and I'm really happy to say that we have a new project manager, a very experienced project manager, starting tomorrow morning. So we can start moving on some of these. Post the 2021 call for projects, there was additional funding made available, and we received the $700,000 for the pedestrian improvements on March Avenue and $500,000 for a project initiation document, a scoping document. It's a $500,000 for a scoping document. Seems like a lot. It's going through the Caltrans process. We have to pay Caltrans somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $200,000 just to do oversight on the contractor that we hire to complete this. Interchanges are a big deal. And so this would be the first step, and we'll go into that in a little more detail. But that's the status on all of those projects. 4 of the 5 have some funding. Next slide, please. So the call for projects is expected in June. It's going to be very similar to the prior cycle. Again, a 5 project max for the city of Healdsburg. They did change the rules so that Santa Rosa and the county of Sonoma can submit 10 projects because they get way more funding typically than we do. And those applications are due in August. Next slide, please. So these are the funding sources and the dollar amounts, with a total of approximately 100 million available. This is not allocated funds. They are competitive. However, they are, the goal of SCTA is to provide equity throughout the county. And historically, the city of Healdsburg, based on population and lane miles, would receive somewhere around 2%. So you're looking at, if we get roughly in that 2 million range, we're feeling okay. You're getting above that, you're starting to feel like you're doing better. But again, SCTA would not say that it's allocated, so they're not shooting for a certain percentage, but that's kind of how things typically end up. Next slide, please. Oh, and these are, all of the prior ones were in acronyms, so I don't know that we need to go in a lot. No, you can move forward. Thank you, Lonnie. All those acronyms are spelled out here. The One Bay Area Grant, which we've received some money from Cycle 2 and 3, is the federal funding and the most difficult of the funding to deal with. The next two are state funds, and all three of those grants are basically for the similar types of projects. The bike and ped, the safety projects really score well. The next two are from GO-Sonoma, so it's county tax measure. This is the much easier money. The dollar value we would get from county tax measure versus going through the federal process, it's worth more just because of the cost to get through the process with the federal funds. And then the last one we are not eligible for, which is near the Grayton Casino area. And SCTA will use these funds, while I said the grants aren't combined, they can take like some of the One Bay Area grant funding and match it with some of their funding if we request a certain amount. And they did that with our Grove Street project. Next slide, please. So this is the scoring criteria. It's updated for Cycle 2 and to match OBEG 4. It addresses the goals established by Plan Bay Area, which is the regional MTC planning document, and Sonoma County's CTP, the Comprehensive Transportation Plan. I will add that when we get to the schedule, OBEG is close to a year out, and so the scoring criteria could change slightly for OBEG 4. Next slide, please. These are the projects staff is recommending. We'll take a quick walk through each one of them. I will say 1 and 2, I think, score very well, though council could easily switch those two priorities. 3 and 4 similarly are a step below that and could be reversed. And then 5 is probably, depending on how we package it, going to score a little bit less. Next slide, please. So the Dry Creek interchange, if we remember, there's a feasibility study that we completed. There were 2 alternatives, one with traffic signals, one with the roundabout couplet. This is just a quick snapshot of one of those roundabouts. Next slide. That feasibility report was done in 2020. We have the funding, as I mentioned, the $500,000 to start the project initiation document, which we will start relatively soon, and that's at least a year to complete. Following that, we would go into environmental and design, estimated at approximately $2 million. Ballpark at construction, which again is going to get further refined when we finish this project initiation document, which is a scoping document. But ballparking that at 12 to 14 million for construction. The benefit here is it's half in the county. I've talked with county public infrastructure, and they are interested potentially in us both applying for this same project. So we could combine county funds and city funds and maybe make a big swing here and go for the whole thing at one time. That's why I had this as priority 1 over the next project. Also worth mentioning, we have approximately 1.7 million in impact fees. So leveraging that money and the partnership with the county, and it would be partnership with Caltrans as well, will all look really good as a grant application. I did mention the schedule could be a challenge because it's going to take many years to get to the point of construction. And these funds have a limit of when that cycle ends. But I believe we could make it, or we would likely make it. I wouldn't move forward if I didn't think we could. Next slide, please. Healdsburg connectivity, this is the money that we've talked about and has moved around a little bit from the Mill District. And yeah, sorry for the poor graphics, but from the bridge to Adeline is what's shown. I had a conversation around 4 o'clock this afternoon, actually, with SCTA. And so we may extend the limits of this to wrap around to Lola's. We have kind of been avoiding that because right-of-way issues, Caltrans issues, because it's within Caltrans right-of-way there. But it would really be nice if we could create that pedestrian walkway on the north side that would actually swing around and tie into the sidewalk that's existing at Lola's. So like at Fincher's and the Fairview right there, there's no sidewalk and it gets really tight and it's kind of a tough place to try to walk. Otherwise, the walking path would be up Adeline to Exchange, and that would get most of the pedestrians where they want to go. So construction cost on this would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 million. But again, without having a really good scope of what we're doing, it's hard to say. But the possibilities on this stretch of street, there's a whole bunch of places you can see there where there's no sidewalk. It's a little bit of a mess with parking and where people are parking. There's plenty of street there. We could probably get in bike lanes or some type of bike facility and safe pedestrian walkway for that whole stretch, which would serve all of that, the community to the north there off of Palm University, Ward and Adeline. And we'll tie into a couple other projects we'll talk about. Next slide, please. Grove Street, this is one not on the books and probably not on anyone's radar, but since we are doing the work on Grove Street and we really wanted to include a project from the ATP that we thought was doable. And there's also somewhat of an art to when we apply for all of these projects, having a smaller project sometimes that can pick up the leftover money can be very advantageous. And this project is estimated to be under $1 million, somewhere in that 850,000 range. We definitely have a need. There's a section where there is no bike lane and we would be tying across Dry Creek, which is the left side of your screen there, to our new project. So that's what this project is. Next slide, please. Mill Street, this is the project that we did not get any funding for last round. It's a good project, but it is not, it hasn't been pushed by the public really at all. It doesn't come up a lot, but it is in the Central Healdsburg Avenue plan, which is how it got into the first round. And in the active transportation plan, the county also did an active transportation plan. And they have work scheduled, not scheduled, but in their plan on West Side Road. So this would tie into West Side Road, take cyclists and pedestrians, but primarily getting the cyclists from the roundabout through the overcrossing of 101 and out West Side Road when they build their project. Again, there's no schedule for that. We think it's a good, clean project, but again, there hasn't been a great demand for it. And that's in the neighborhood of $1.5 million. Next slide, please. I very much regret this slide, so please don't try to read it. The concept here was we were asked to give our priorities for transportation. And it's hard to say we're giving our top priorities if we don't have some type of paving project. This was some of the pavement maintenance that we ultimately pushed out when we did March. But I think if we were to move forward with the pavement maintenance project, we're going to need to combine it with some type of pedestrian crossings or bike lanes somewhere where there's other need beside the pavement. But I still think we can do that and include what much needed pavement maintenance. And these types of projects are very scalable because there are a bunch of segments so you can adjust. Next slide, please. And then projects considered, we considered everything. We considered every project that is in the comprehensive transportation plan, which is an attachment to the agenda report. We looked at our CIP lists, and those were the 5 projects that we ultimately are recommending. The top 2 on this list are great projects that would score well. The problem is in neither case are we really ready. We don't have enough information to scope this to have an understanding of what it's all going to be. The Ward Street neighborhood, where we have the funding, it was really to bring that neighborhood, those 4 streets, Healdsburg going north to the railroad tracks, kind of up to city standards. They're missing sidewalks, they have drainage issues, they have pavement issues. The 1.2 million that we have isn't enough to do all of that. It is enough to design something to fix the drainage and maybe build some of those sidewalk gaps. Then we can follow through with something else. The Railroad Avenue project would be going from Ward Street to Adeline and then all the way to Branch Street in Mill District. And so that, coupled with improvements in that neighborhood and Healdsburg Avenue connectivity, as the Smart Station platform is going in so that they can cross the tracks, really changes that whole neighborhood, and they all tie in so well together. But again, unfortunately, we're just not far enough along in what that concept is or where the platform's going to be. So council could push us in that direction, and we would definitely do our best, but we may end up in a little bit of a situation like we have on the Ward Street where we don't have a great plan moving forward, and we have to start investing some money and working on that, which we will. Then the next 2 are just next 3, I should say, are projects that we need but are not going to score well, and therefore we just didn't think it was worth it. We're constantly thinking about ways to find funding for the Sunset Narrows, that section of the wall on Sherman Street that's failing, and we've closed down the sidewalk. And while it hasn't come up recently, the need for improvements down on the square at the crossings, there really is a need for some streetscape work. But again, they don't really fit the criteria. Next slide, please. So the schedule, a lot here. I don't know that we need to go through it. The STIP funding is really what's pushing the schedule. OBEG call for projects is expected in March of 2026. And then early 2027 is when all of this is getting finalized. It feels like it's way off, but I've got the big task of 5 grant applications in August, early August. So need to get started, which is why I'm here tonight. Next slide, please. With that, I will open it up to questions or comments.
Thank you very much for that report. Do we have questions? Councilmember Edwards.
Thank you for the detail on that. I wanted to go back on the procedure and how you pick these projects. It really isn't what we need or what we want, but it's how well they score against that sheet.
It's both. I start with what we need. Typically what council has approved in the past, what's in our CIP, what's in our planning documents. But then from there, just because we need something, like in my case, I'm saying we really could use some pavement maintenance. Straight slurry seals throughout the city just isn't going to score well. If we make it our #1 priority, we say it's the most important thing, we might get money for it, but it's not going to be the big chunk. It's not going to bring us as much maybe as something else.
So in other words, like the Sunset, that's not going to score us on emissions reduction or bicycle transportation. So that's why a project like that doesn't score as high with this grant funding?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Obviously some tough choices to make, and I really appreciate you going into how you made them. And you know, I'm certainly leaning to approve your recommendations, but it is a shame to punt on the Ward Street revitalization, the Railroad Avenue projects. I can see how those are going to be really important to the next phase of Healdsburg, really, that area around the train station. So what do you see as the next steps with that?
Well, if I could, a perfect lead in. So we do have 1.2 million for Ward Street. So that will get us the design. We with my new project manager coming in, I'm hoping to get an RFP out relatively soon. That gets us a design, that gets us an understanding of what we need and can fix the drainage and probably add sidewalks, do some good work there. It may not get to the point of doing the pavement, but now we can be comfortable in doing the pavement because we've fixed the drainage and we understand some of the other problems.
And you have the planning in place to do these other projects later on, is that right?
Yes, and the Railroad Avenue, while it may not be necessary, I think it would be prudent to wait for SMART to be farther along to know where the platform is going to be, because that's the connection from that whole neighborhood, whether it's bikes or pedestrians, to be able to cross the railroad tracks and get to the train station or other places north. That project is going to score very well. So even if it isn't through this process, there will be other grants out there for Railroad Avenue.
Okay, that's awesome. Thanks.
Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. Really appreciate the presentation and the explanation of the sources of funds and just talking through kind of where we're at in a lot of these major projects. I agree with the recommendations, and I wanted to ask, so I know we just received the large land use planning grant from MTC for the priority development area in and around the SMART station. And so I'm curious, I mean, I think the Railroad Avenue project, I agree, it's not, I wouldn't even say it's fully baked. It's like we haven't even written the recipe yet to put it in the oven. So I think we definitely are going to need to do something in that area. But I'm curious, are we going to include in that planning process the conversation around how to create that connectivity for the Ward Street neighbor? I say Ward Street neighborhood, but the end of Ward, where it would connect to the back end of Mill District. Can we include that in some of those planning conversations as we advance that land use planning grant for the PDA?
Councilmember Kelly, that's a great question. And yes, overall circulation and connectivity to the planned SMART station is one of the components of that grant, and that goes across all, ped, bike, transit, as well as vehicular. So that will very much be a part of that planning effort.
Great. I could definitely see that roadway project. I think this is what Director Zimmer was getting at. I could see that project being something that does score high and that we could get funding for, especially if we're like jointly applying and SMART is on board with it down the road. But we need to like get some traction before we're ready. So it might be, it would be probably teed up for the right timing of the next SCTCA funding cycle, probably 3 years out, which would be good. So I look forward to those conversations.
Thank you. So let me open this up to public comment. Anybody wishing to make public comment? Looking at you. Okay, thank you. So we'll bring it back to council. And do we provide some direction to staff here? Go ahead, Council.
I like their recommendations.
Okay. I'm good with them as well. Councilmember Kelly?
Yeah, I like the recommendations. I think the Mill Street area, basically between the roundabout and West Side Road as you're heading out towards county jurisdiction and the 101, I think that area has a lot of opportunity for those pedestrian improvements. And I think, you know, if you can recall when you're pulling into the backside of like the Carl's Jr. area and Safeway, there's just not a lot of pedestrian protections there or bicycle protections. And I think as we see so much more development happening in that shopping center where Coyote and the Parish are, we're going to have more pedestrian and bicyclists, you know, using that zone. And Director Zimmer did talk about there is a county project that's in the works for bicycle improvements on West Side Road. So they're going to be kind of working their way towards the city limits. And if we can start working our way towards the county, I think that that area in and around there could be a really great opportunity to do more. So I think that the projects that are being proposed are great. If we can get that roundabout at the 101 Dry Creek Road interchange funded in partnership with the county in a joint application, I think that's going to be huge. And I think there's a big opportunity that we can actually get those funds. So I think this is a creative solution to partner with the county and to try to get that $16 million.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I agree. So do you have direction? Yes. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you very much for that report. And so now our final thing tonight, council reports on matters of interest occurring since the previous meeting. Who wants to start us off?
I'm happy to start by just saying that I've been recovering from surgery and doing well and have not been able to attend the many events happening in Healdsburg, but I've been reading about them and seeing them on social media, and I'm so grateful for the incredible community connectedness that I've been watching from afar, and I can't wait to hear all the stories of the community center project or unveiling this weekend. So thank you.
It's really nice to see you, and I'm glad you're getting better. Thank you. We'll look forward to the parade, perhaps, right?
Perhaps.
Yeah, okay. We'll play that by ear still. Thank you. Ron, do you want to go?
Yeah, we did the Vice Mayor and I were at the Senior Tea event, which is really a lot of fun. That anything happening at the senior center is always going to be a lot of fun on that one. And then we went over to the Arts and Culture Open House plan. It was really nice to see the turnout of the art community really supporting that commission. That was really exciting to do that one. And kind of on a bad side, the legislative committee will be getting a report on the state budget. They are projecting it right now at 12, but from Assemblyman Connolly's office, it's looking more like 30 or 40 million in the red for the state. So something for us to kind of keep our eye on going forward. I think we're doing a good job in this city, staying ahead of things. So and of course, Sunday was just amazing. You know, it really hit me when Abel was talking about when he was running, knocking on door to door, and this was 47 years ago, and taking his daughter with him. And it reminded me of when I took my granddaughter knocking on doors, and just to see, and you know, what's really interesting is when he ran, the Hispanic population, he said, was 5% in Healdsburg. He got elected, and it just shows how this city has always been open to protected classes, going back to the founding of the city in cities in the county that actually allowed minorities to participate. And so that was just a fantastic event, and keeping that connection of 47 years ago to today, to where we still, when you run for council, you go out and you knock on doors. And I think that that's a great tradition we have, and continue in that. So it was a fun event.
Thank you for that. David?
Yeah, that was a great event. When he started telling that story, I was like, where is he going with this? Because I had a different experience. I thought it was great the first time I ran, when my daughter was 5 and my son, I think, was 3. Like, great, knock on the door, and next thing you know, my son's throwing rocks and my daughter's going, Dag, here we go. So I'm like, all right, one time, that's enough. But it was a great event. I like that he was, you know, sharing stories about, you know, when he ran and the mentoring that went on. He specifically mentioned Jerry Edinger. And when you think of, I mean, I'm old compared to the council members back then when they're in their 30s, which is awesome. But it was a great event, great to, see everybody there, and the turnout was awesome. I had a couple other things. I had a call on with a local volleyball coach that there's a group that is really interested in Healdsburg having their own sand volleyball courts, which is really becoming something that other cities have. And so there was an initial conversation on that, which was very productive. There's some really nice ones at the Spring Hill Church off of River Road. And let's see, on Wednesday of this week, I will be providing opening remarks at the NWPPA conference in Santa Rosa. And the last thing I wanted to mention a couple things. So, we're all getting excited for the parade on Thursday, but I want everybody to just keep in mind that there's also a fair going on. There are a lot of kids in town that have worked really hard on their various projects. And so a couple things to keep in mind. So the animals are actually going to be going to the fairgrounds starting at 6 a.m. on Wednesday. So the kids are going to be up early, getting that going and converting the baseball field to, cows and pigs and chicken. Well, I don't know if there's chickens this year, but like all the animals, animals are going to be there. And then on Friday, there's the cake and barrel auction at 6 p.m. And then Saturday, I wanted to mention that they moved up the buyer's auction. It used to start later in the evening. Now it's going to be starting at 2 o'clock for the live auction, the livestock auction, which really helps because some of the kids were going up at 10:30 at night. So this really, it's going to be a beautiful weekend. I looked here, Thursday is going to be 76 degrees for the parade. Perfect for our flannel shirts. Friday is going to be 75. So if you're off, come down to the fair and check out all the showmanship that starts at 8 o'clock is the swine show, 8 in the morning, and it goes all day. And then Saturday is going to be a perfect 80 degrees. So it's just, we're looking at a very beautiful weekend. And then finally, I just want to acknowledge our staff that when I'm, sitting in the stands, I'm watching the auction and looking at all of that, I know that in 2 weeks will be converted to the field for the prune packers and getting it back. And just, I always appreciate the behind the scenes effort that it takes to take livestock field auction and convert it back to a clean baseball diamond ready for baseball and then go right into Tuesdays on the Plaza. It's the busy season, so I appreciate everything our staff is gearing up to do. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Nothing really different to add to what Councilmember Edwards mentioned. I went to the Mother's Day tea and the arts and culture meetup, and I made most of the De Luna naming ceremony, and all three were really special in their own ways. And I just, you said what was really great about these events, and it doesn't need to be repeated really, but at all of them, it's really fantastic place to have conversations with all kinds of community members that you might not otherwise meet and talk to. So I always really value that aspect of it. So at each one of those events, you had folks who were eager to share all kinds of little things about the city, things they like, things they don't like, questions, and so on. And so really grateful for those opportunities to come out and meet some new people and get feedback and so on. But this week is a special week always in Healdsburg. It really feels like as local as it can get. And I appreciate Councilmember Higley's optimism as usual, and I share it. And I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody out there.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I totally agree. So I had a couple things I did this last couple of weeks. The directors and council members had a meeting on week ago, and we received a presentation from the Sonoma County personnel about master plan for aging, which made me think of Ron, not because you're aging, but And I have a copy of it here to give to you, so I thought you might like that. I saw on Zoom the Zero Waste meeting, which was fun and interesting. And then this is something I don't very often do, we had the third grade Alexander Valley School students here with their teacher and some parents with Raina and Lonnie, and we did a tour of the building. And then we did a mock council meeting here too, and they had two topics. One was no more homework, which won. And then the other one was ice cream, I think every day, and I think they got it down to 1 day a week. You had to bring your lunch money, you had to bring your toothpaste and toothbrush, and it had to be healthy, made of avocados or something. So, I mean, they got really specific. So, and some of the public comment thing that they did, so they all played different roles, and one of the public comments were sometimes like the public comments we get. We're like, wow, these guys are amazing. So it was a ton of fun, and I appreciate, you guys putting it together. So went to the groundbreaking at the Mill District for their rec pool. Ron was there, and that was fun. We got to meet a lot of the people who have moved in there now, so they're really getting populated, and the people are very, very nice. Went to the ribbon cutting for the Outlander, Patrick James. Ron was there too. Then the March Avenue community meeting. Ron and I hung out all day that day, so we were at that, and Larry did a great job on that. Thank you very much for that. And then, of course, the thing yesterday, which was so inspiring. And so Healdsburg in a kind of an interesting way, because there were so many people from outside of Healdsburg that had come to attend it. But I think Mayor DeLuna really brought it home to Healdsburg, and he said a couple of times, this is Healdsburg, right? And only in Healdsburg does this happen. And then he talked about, his running for office, what that was like. So he really brought it down to the level of us and our city, and that I really appreciated, because that was what it was really all about in my mind. And he is so humble and so appreciative. He said he never thought he was going to get this kind of a thing happen in his lifetime, and the fact that it did, and here he was. So it just really felt great, and it was nice to have everybody there. So that's it. That's all I have. So with that, and Jeff, you're right. At 8:28, we'll close this